four-wheel drive enthusiasts dream of starting a trek in the middle of the greatest off-road country in the land, so we decide to do just that. It's day one for the roundabout Back and Beyond convoy, facing a 5,000 kilometre trek between Ayers Rock and Alice Springs. Yes, the long way. And typical Central Australian November temperatures greet us. 46 degrees in the shade as we head out along the Lassiter Highway with Ayers Rock in our dust and the Olgas in our sights, witnessing the world's worst road corrugations, and the trek is only 20 kilometres old. After the Olgas, the corrugations level out and we face an all-night drive through never-ending bends and creek washouts until day two presents a real outback highway and the convoy gets a chance to pick up some lost time. Here, the Lassiter Highway winds its way in and out of the Peterman Ranges, presenting the off-roader with an incredibly even two-lane wide drive. But this pleasant Sunday afternoon-style atmosphere changes dramatically when we finally encounter the infamous Gun Barrel Highway. And so far, we've only clocked up 295 kilometres. Now to introduce the crew for this trek that's made up of 4 vehicles, all Toyotas. The leader being a brand new petrol troop carrier. Next in line, another 1987 petrol FJ60 Land Cruiser. Then tail end Charlie, the ever-reliable 1987 diesel troop carrier. And of course the last vehicle where we're shooting from, the film wagon, a 1980 FJ60. And here we're approaching the unusually named range of hills, the Schwerin-Mural Crescent that surround the Giles Meteorological Station in Western Australia. It's only 28 kilometres down the Gun Barrel from the Lassiter intersection. So, with the compass pointing due west, we head out along the abandoned Gun Barrel Highway stretch, a dilapidated, bumpy road with numerous detours around deep and dangerous erosions. To one of the few hills to raise the elevation of the road beyond the usual dead flatness of this remote outback track. It's called Mount Samuel, 684 kilometres into our trek, a roundabout Back and Beyond. And from this near 100-metre high mound you can see forever and ever and ever. Then for our last signs of civilization on day 4, as we approach Carnegie and Glenelg homesteads, heading for the Canning stock route, in particular Well 9, that's better known as Weld Springs. A name on the Canning map that's steeped in history, starting way back in June 1874, when it was discovered by a young explorer, John Forrest. He named the soak after the then Governor of Western Australia, Sir Frederick Weld. Unlike Forrest, we arrived at the springs in the middle of a desert windstorm. Despite that, the temperature still exceeded the mid-40s. John Forrest later became the Premier of Western Australia, prepared for politics by his explorations in this unfriendly and remote land, especially here, where he and his men had to build a 10-foot by 9-foot by 7-foot high stone fort to repel 40 hostile natives. And like Forrest, on reaching the Canning, we realised our trek had seen its better days because from here on, every hill, every plain and every sharp stab of Spinifex grass reminded us that this really is outback Australia, definitely not a place for novices. It's a track of a bumpy road and Spinifex again, for as far as your eyes can see. And every Spinifex plain has a gully, and every gully has suspension testing gut-wrenching erosion washouts, as we discover that the first 20 kilometres of the Canning stock route is far worse than even the abandoned section of the Gun Barrel Highway. So it's plain to see that the Canning was first discovered and surveyed as a cattle route. What's difficult to relate to is the fact that it took the stockmen as many days to travel between the Canning wells, about 20 kilometres apart, that it's just taken us to get here from Ayers Rock, 1,296 kilometres away, and in only 4 days. Only an hour after leaving Well 9, we're approaching Well 10, one of the man-made structures that's still standing after 78 years of the harsh desert climate. The structure's existence today says a lot for Australian hardwoods, and the way they were worked by the men Alfred Canning employed in 1908 in his bold but successful bid to create a stock route through 3 deserts to supply cattle from the Kimberley region in the far north to the meat-starved southern goldfields of Kalgoorlie and Coolgardie. Shortly after leaving Well 10, we encounter the first of many sandhills on the Canning stock route. Actually, we've been told there are around 2,000 dunes on the route. We believe our source, despite the fact that we didn't actually count them. I can't imagine why. From sandy tracks to rock and pebbles before a drop down to one of the too numerous to mention clay pans and Well 11 that's now in an extremely dilapidated state. Then another rocky road that stretches across the plain to trees and again, much more sand. Actually here, the sand is as fine as talcum powder, like bull dust, with the ability to sneak into the vehicle and cover everything with its bland redness. And according to our research, we're going to be seeing a lot more of this before we get anywhere near civilization again. And we're only a third of the way into our trek, rapidly approaching White Lake. But first, another sand dune. Then to our first sighting of a salt flat. It's White Lake, where the shimmering of the crusty salt creates a mirage of water that even includes reflections of the distant surrounding sand dunes. And it's at this stage you start wondering about the unconquerable tenacity and durability of the West's great explorers. Here we are, driving along in air-conditioned and extremely comfortable vehicles, with the desert heat still finding a way to penetrate your strength and weaken your resolve. So what in blazes drove those men to succeed? Way back in the 1850s, it was the Carnegie and Calvert expeditions, and later on, the Forrest, Giles, Warburton and Canning treks. Just imagine spending up to 12 months like them exploring this endless desert, sometimes riding, but more often than not, trudging on foot, because the horses or camels were also finding it just too much in this heat. Well, we immediately realised how difficult it would be to survive without our modern-day conveniences, let alone on foot. And as a result, it made us more aware of the need to be well-equipped when venturing into desert regions. As a result, we took time out to again double-check our water and food rations, vehicle spares, puncture kits, maps, and our sole link with the real world, the Flying Doctor Radio, aptly named Coden, the Good Samaritan. With every kilometre clocked up, we approach the Tropic of Capricorn, and the thermometer agrees with us as it slowly climbs beyond the normally bearable limit, and you can almost feel yourself losing weight as waterfalls of perspiration cascade down your face to evaporate before it drips to your already saturated shirt. It most certainly is an experience words can only just describe. Actually, it's one of the very rare occasions when you really have to be there to get the true picture. the fourth day of our journey from Ayers Rock, and we've so far seen 8 wells in various stages of ageing in only 150 kilometres of the Canning stock route. Some of them have been soaks where the high water table exceeds the land elevation, and the others were man-made. However, we're now slowly approaching a natural spring, and that's something of a rarity in this Western Australian distant outback. But before we even see a trace of that oasis, we have to endure more heat, more sand, more spinifex and much more dust. Not forgetting, of course, the inevitable sand dunes. From the comfort of an armchair, you could be excused for imagining these sand dunes as being easy obstacles to overcome in a four-wheel drive. Well, let me assure you, the task is extremely difficult. Certainly, petrol engines, high and low range and power steering helps, but you have to realise that this sand is a dust. It's literally like steering a boat through tight corners and short run-ups to reach the ridge of a dune. Then you have to sort of float around the bends, frequently opposite locking and invariably edging very close to stumps jagging out from the side of the track. Off-roaders call them stakes because they can pierce the heart of any tyre. However, our BF Goodrich all-purpose off-roaders accommodated our requirements. Once again, the right gear for the worst occasions. To the oasis. Canning called it well number 17. The natives named it Kilagara. It's a permanent waterhole or rock pearl set deep inside a natural gorge in the northern face of the Durbar Hills. And after only one day in this desert, we could hardly hide our relief when we saw the massive headland on the horizon announcing to us, the weary travellers, that an oasis is nearby. Rests the neighbouring Deeble Hills, featuring typical flat-top, low-altitude desert mesas. But our destination calls, and we move on closer to the protective Durbar Hills headlands. The gorge is protected and semi-hidden by the headlands and thick vegetation. But after a kilometre walk along a dry creek bed, you are greeted by an immense rock wall art gallery of ancient Aboriginal drawings, with some hard to get to, but well and truly worth the effort. These are the easier to find traces of the former inhabitants. Other remnants like smooth cave floors and body-smoothed cliff ledges take a bit of finding, but they're a true reward for the modern-day explorer, especially here in this gorge, Kilagara, first uncovered by Alfred Canning's right-hand man, Hubert Trotman, only 80-odd years ago. And that was when the Canning party was in desperate need for water. And what a supply they discovered here, one of the very few natural springs this far into our outback. Hundreds and hundreds of kilometres from nowhere, from anywhere. Back out of Kilagara Gorge and 6 kilometres off the track further along the northern face is the Durbar Springs headland. Totally different to Kilagara's heavily wooded hidden beauty, Durbar, as you can see, is wide open. This gorge features a thick matting of grass and ghost gums and only a spattering of the needle-sharp spinifex. The ideal location for a campsite, surrounded by prominent, steep, deep red cliffs bearing the erosion scars of millions of years. A dry but beautiful harbour of the desert. For us, 11 travel-weary adventurers, a temporary home away from home for 48 hours. Day 6, and again another eye-opening, completely different landscape in this Pandora's box of tricks. This time, a sand dune valley full of desert oaks, with just enough foliage to restrict the morning desert breezes and trap the already stiflingly hot atmosphere. Now from a sand dune valley to a broad and dry clay pan plain, 65 kilometres further along the canning from Derby Hills, as we drive past Kununagi, well 19, rapidly approaching more salt flats and the Tropic of Capricorn. Driving under these extremely difficult desert conditions, it's hard to believe that some people attack this track with underprepared vehicles and insufficient rations and water. Around this area, many wrecks of trailers and bikes can be found, bearing testament to its toughness. We all feel secure with our solid preparation and common sense, with all aspects of vehicle motors, tyres and suspensions triple checked, along with our food supplies, especially water, and our communication systems. Plus a double check with the WA motoring body regarding the latest condition report on the canning track, and more importantly, the exact locations of the very few drinkable water wells or springs. Anyone who doesn't do his homework for survival on the canning will more often than not be proved to be dead ignorant. Bumping along these endless flats, you wonder if you're heading for another sand dune valley, or maybe this time the cattle route takes us over the dunes. The one thing about this trek is the fact that it's never boring. Yes, this time a quick dip over a dune, then once more an oven-like sand dune valley, testing the engine temperatures to the limit. And again, another landscape change. This time, the dense growth of spinifex and desert oaks make way for the ever-encroaching desert sands to create an atmosphere that Canning's aide Trotman once aptly described as being as bare as the stare in a dead man's face. At the end of the plain, an overpowering stench of salt infiltrates the vehicles, and up around the bend the source is discovered, a water-laden savoury creek, a major tributary of one of Western Australia's biggest inland salt flats, Lake Disappointment. Located halfway between Derby Hills and our next destination, Well 26, Lake Disappointment stretches for nearly 50 kilometres east to west and around 70 kilometres lengthwise, bisected by the Tropic of Capricorn. And the heat haze tells the story as we continue along the Canning past the Mackay Ranges. Well 23, one of the least time-worn wells, with its trough still intact and the pulley whip pole still standing proudly after nearly 80 years, serving a different purpose in this modern age as it points the way down the Tallawanna track to Bill Shepherd's life-saving fuel dump. It would have to be one of Australia's most isolated and least used gas stations, but probably one of the most important. We've travelled 887 kilometres since our last fill-up at Carnegie, with the vehicles averaging 12.26 miles per gallon. Not bad, considering the going's been tough. And the tough are certainly getting rough. back on the track again, and the next stop is the recently restored Well 26. But first, a hint of the sand dunes in store for us as we edge around a dune that's twice as big as any we've seen so far. And it's not long before our Everest rears its handsome face, ready for the onslaught of the roundabout Back and Beyond squad. And they're tricky little blighters. Every time you get to the top of one of these dunes, you never know what to expect. Some dive to the left or right, while others, like this one, bear away to the right to offer a straight run for about 100 metres or so before ducking to the left, giving you no run up at all for a sand dune that's as steep as the interest on your overdraft. Now for the second petrol 60 in third gear, low range, and the accelerator's jammed up somewhere near the radiator. No worries so far. Now for the real test, the heavily laden diesel chuck wagon. Just having a look. Thought I'd back up for more. Take two and nearly three, as this time he nearly picks up the cameraman to take him along for the experience. With our recently replenished gas tanks a little worse for wear after the monster sand ridges, it's back into fifth gear for some crucial fuel conservation as the roundabout Back and Beyond convoy continues along another seemingly endless spinifex plain. And again, the ever-present dark line of another monster dune is looming on the horizon. As you can see in the background, we've literally run into a sea of dunes, but fortunately this time the stock route winds around, then along the ridges, and for once you thank the stockman for bypassing these mini Ayers rocks. And finally we drop down over the side of the last dune into another desert oak valley and a spinifex plain, and we head for Well 26. It's around about now you start to realise just how big this country of ours is when you see three large four-wheel drive vehicles nearly disappear into a spinifex plain. Getting it into perspective, you could describe the convoy as simply being insignificant traces of dust on this football field of life. To Well 26, a mere 2,023 kilometres from the start of our trek, and we're approximately smack bang in the middle of the Canning stock route. But more importantly, Well 26 was a site chosen for restoration back in 1983. So this is exactly what the original Canning wells looked like to the stockmen and to the natives when they were first built between 1909 and 1910. And the water in this particular well is about as good as you'll get anywhere in the country, making it an ideal campsite complete with its own bath, the trough. We like the site so much we decided to spend an extra day here before heading off on day 8 for an old Canning campsite near Separation Well. It's around here that quite a few early explorers breathed their last breath as a result of either being lost or attacked by the locals. And the Aboriginals in those early days had every right to try and scare off visitors because to them a constant and reliable water supply was their lifeblood, and there was no way they could understand the reasons for the explorations. So the misunderstandings continued after the first decade of this century, right up to just before the Second World War, when the last native uprising was recorded. Actually, in one of the 1920s skirmishes around Well 37, the entire droving team, including 8 Aboriginal stockmen, was wiped out by the natives. To the most famous slaying on the route, that of one of Canning's well borers, Michael Tobin, in April 1907, here at Walla Walla, or Well 40. Another flat campsite without spinifex. Well 40 is located at the end of a clay pan that now boasts quite a few species of galah and budgies. Unfortunately, the water here isn't fit for human consumption. About 250 metres away from the Claypan well is Michael Tobin's gravesite, situated ideally on the peak of a sand ridge overlooking the Claypans and a dune valley. A large salt lake to the south is named after him. Day 9, our last one on the Canning, we thought, as we recall the trek so far with our sights firmly set on the next landmarks, Mount Ford and the Breeden Hills. And again, the stock route pulls just another surprise out of the hat with this, the old-time bad luck pick-a-card track, as bull dust fills numerous potholes, presenting to the driver a seemingly smooth road. But that's not the case as you steer straight down the centre, never knowing where you're going to bump to next. The only good thing about this stretch is that according to our maps, these are the last of the sand ridges. And now we're driving alongside it. The very last northern sand dune in the Canning stock route, number 1,800, so we're told. And after conquering it, we've promised excellent driving conditions all the way to Halls Creek. And the promise was spot on. A great driving track with the vehicles now able to average around 50 kilometres an hour for the first time since we struck the rugged sections of the abandoned Gun Barrel Highway. In other words, since then, we've been averaging 30 kilometres an hour for 10 hours of driving each day for just over a week, and all in the heat and sticky discomfort of true desert conditions. That's why we're ecstatic with this speed improvement, and so are the batteries. From here, near Mount Ford, our next destination, Halls Creek, is only about 450 kilometres away. On a road like this, clear sailing. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? The only aspect of outback travel that we haven't witnessed now becomes a reality. A clay pan that's been filled by an early wet season downpour. And this time our fearless diesel troop carrier come chuck wagon tests the track. Evaporating so fast that it hasn't had time to soak through to the clay base to give us a gooey road. So we all ford the little lake with no problems. Or so we think as we continue the trek and discover that finally one of the vehicles has succumbed to the rigours of the desert and the 2,614 kilometres behind us. The 1980 FJ60 with thousands of off-road Ks on the clock finds a weakness in the hub studs and chucks a wheel. Mechanics say it'll take a bit of borrowing from the film vehicle and a few hours to fix. Yes, you've got to be seen to be doing your bit. Well, folks, he's the chief and he's everywhere. Then the reinforcements arrive. Maybe if I take an hour to get the overalls on, all the hard work will be done. Dressed at last, and it's time to lie down on the job. Have you got the feeling that this is the vehicle version of a heart transplant? Needless to say, it did take a few hours, then we had a bit more sunlight to push on. Then once again, another Spinifex plane. Sometimes you think you're going backwards on this track because the scenery has this bad habit of repeating itself. We called it the been there syndrome. But despite what could be regarded as landscape monotony, the differences were astounding as the roads evened out, the average kilometres per hour increased, the temperatures either dropped or we were getting acclimatised, and this final desert stretch became quite interesting for the whole crew. So we decided to drive through the night to get as close to Halls Creek as we could. Halls Creek, civilization at last after 9 days on the road from Ayers Rock via the Gun Barrel Highway and the Canning Stock Route to Western Australia's Kimberley region. We see it, but we don't believe it. A tar road. The Great Northern Road, to be precise. Now we only have 16 kilometres to go to clock up 3,028 kilometres, and the trip's back has been broken, especially with the desert well and truly in our dust and Halls Creek just over the horizon. But before a nice bed down in a motel, we decide to end the Canning trek properly by visiting Old Halls Creek, the site of Western Australia's first gold rush, and the first landmark is the white quartz China wall, believed to be the longest single fault of its kind in the world. Nearby is Carolyn's Pool, the original favourite Sunday picnic spot for the settlers of the old area back in the last decade of the 19th century. Not too far away, near the Elvira River, are the remains of one of the few old-time buildings left in Old Halls Creek, the mud brick-built police station. Then again in the distance, the white quartz China wall crests the Albert Edward mountain range. And we decide to call it a day to head back to the creek to rediscover the comfort of a bed. Then to our surprise, the luxury of the Kimberley Hotel Motel, just off the main road in Halls Creek. Literally an oasis of lush grass, shady trees, spacious rooms and a pool. And believe you me, to us, after 9 days of desert, this is heaven. Definitely a time to relax after our unanimous vote to stay over for a rest day. Our stay at Halls Creek ends on the morning of the 11th day as we continue along the Great Northern Road towards the Ord River scheme. And here is our first sign of this temperamental natural wonder, a 500-metre wide crossing. Just after the crossing, we leave the main road for another four-wheel drive only trek, inland to the Bungle Bungle Ranges that were only officially discovered back in the early 1980s. Despite the fact that local station owners and Aboriginals have been aware of their beauty for decades, maybe they just wanted to keep it all to themselves. Now we're deep inside the National Park, about 30 kilometres from the main road, for the first real glimpse of the Bungles. On arrival at the base of the massif, two of the cameras get a chance to fly instead of drive as a chartered chopper prepares to land at the very popular Bungle Bungle's meeting spot, the Three Ways. With the cameras and the crew still organising their flight path on the Slingsby chopper, the convoy departs heading towards the northern section of the range's northwest peninsula. This side of the range only features gorges, and that's what the chopper crew will be highlighting. That's when they decide to take off. So we trek on towards Red Rock Creek and the northern exit of the park via the Osmond Valley to look for some wildflowers and somewhere, anywhere with some shade. At last, lift off from the Three Ways parking lot, and to show you why we selected an aircraft to capture most of the beauty of this 240 square mile natural wonder of Australia, all of a sudden, the dry remoteness comes alive as the chopper gains altitude, leaving the heat haze behind and swings around the horizon for a panoramic view to equal any in the world. Then, within minutes, they catch up with the convoy and swoop over the top for a flyover before heading south beside the ranges to their first stop on the scenic route, the Ord River. The Ord River is literally teeming with wildlife after early wet season rains have given this normally dry bed a new lease of life. The vegetation, consisting of river red gums, paperbarks and bendees, the old bent flow gums, provide the bird life with ideal feed, in particular the corellas and the rare jabiru. Heading away from the Ord and Panton River Junction towards the southern and most unusual face of the Bungle Bungles, with the outlying hills indicating we haven't got too far to go as we follow the dry Piccaninny Creek bed to what has been described as Australia's very own Grand Canyon. The 350 million year old unusually shaped weathered cliffs, steep ravines and deep gorges of the richly coloured red, black and orange Bungle Bungle Ranges. Now we're approaching the mouth to Piccaninny Gorge. It's by far the most spectacular ravine in the entire park, located in the middle of the range's southern face. And all vehicular access is banned east of the gorge's western entrance, so for the rest of the sightseeing trip that'll take you deep inside the ravines, can only be accessed by hiking or by helicopters. So join us for the flight of your life. With these close-ups of the walls, you can clearly see the honeycomb-like stripings that wind their way all around this part of the ranges, even deep inside this gorge that penetrates the massif for around 10 kilometres, nearly right up to the northwestern peninsula. This banding creates a beehive image only associated in Australia with the Bungle Bungles. It's made up of the orange, silica, and the black, that's lichen, a living organism that's formed by a combination of algae and a fungus. And beneath this protective layer that literally restricts the erosion of the face is a whitey yellow coloured sandstone that's extremely fragile to weathering, to the extent the exterior easily crumbles under hand or foot pressure. As a result, the park rangers don't allow climbing of the beehives or the landing of helicopters anywhere on or immediately near this massif, in their bid to conserve its beauty for all to see for as long as it's available to public access. With another early wet season shower moving in, the air currents around the ravine begin to stir, giving the pilots some test flying conditions. Look closely at the gorge floor and some of the ledges for dark patches of vegetation. You'll be able to see some occasional outcrops of rainforest-like palms. They've been named Livistona, and they're such a rare species that some botanists say that at this stage they appear to be unique only to the Bungle Bungles. And they survive with other vegetation on rock ledges and the like because the sandstone content of the Bungles is like a massive sponge. You'll rarely see pools of water around, but it's always humid as the desert-like heat steams the moisture from the massif. Then the trek up to the head of the Piccaninny Gorge continues, unfortunately accompanied by the threat of another early wet season downpour. approaches the end of the southern gorge area to make its way over the plateau top of the range, the ground crew is about 20 kilometres due north, stopping occasionally to capture a sprig of native hibiscus and speargrass, set against the not-so-honeycombed northwestern peninsula face of the massif. And still the trek continues, heading closer to Red Rock Creek and Osmond Valley, but more importantly, some shade near a waterhole. But back in the air, the camera is nearing the northern gorges and the northwestern peninsula of the Bungle Bungles. With the shower of rain moving slowly westward, the sun makes another appearance to illuminate the sheer ravine cliffs, highlighting again the patches of vegetation occupying every ledge, nook and cranny. Station owners and regular explorers of the Bungles are confident this area of gorges on the northwestern face were the only ones in the entire range that the natives could actually use to get to the top plateau. The local historians say that was only necessary when the cattlemen first settled in the region. Evidently, the Aboriginals used the out-of-the-way plateau as a safe hideout from white men. However, the experts still have to uncover the secret as to how anyone could climb these sheer cliffs to get to the top. As you can see, they aren't exactly speckled with footholds or climbing cracks. Listening to the tales of the early days around this area makes you wonder just how long ago it was that man, black or white, first climbed onto the top of this precipitous range of mountains. While it has been indicated that there are some waterholes in the top, few forms of animal life have been found. So how long could a tribe last up here? Panning the bleak walls of the Bungle ranges for the last time and noting the dark marks that show where the water falls in the wet season, it's time to head north to locate the convoy that's not too far from Fowl House Pool in Red Rock Creek, said to be a haven for turtles and freshwater crocodiles. Unfortunately, we didn't see any. And likewise, the chopper crew had a similar problem trying to find us. Merely a convoy of 4 vehicles nestled in a shady patch of trees. So we had to call them in with the UHF radios. Fortunately, the pilot is used to locating stock in this region. So at last a sighting. And for us, a fond farewell to this mysterious range of gorges and questionable history. One thing's for sure, none of us will ever forget the Bungle's remarkable beauty. Truly Australia's own Grand Canyon, and definitely a tourist haven of the future. With the chopper refueled and on its way again, it's time for the convoy to prepare for the last leg of this day's trek out of the Bungle Bungles to the Ragged Ranges and more of the Ord River scheme, via some extremely rugged creek beds called tracks. And we had the privilege to be the last convoy allowed to use the Osborne Valley exit track in the park. About 100 kilometres from the Bungles is the Argyle project, a massive open-cut diamond mine, signposted by a man-made mountain of mine refuse. Recently acquired by De Beers and said to be the world's largest, it certainly is one of the most modern. In particular, the mine's accommodation for staff, literally a 5-star Hilton hotel right out in the desert. In direct contrast, further to the north, a typical Kimberley region cattle property, the Lissadell Station, incorporating all the land for as far as you can see. Then another rocky-faced string of mountains, appropriately named the Ragged Ranges. Day 11, and we're now not far from our destination for the night, Kununurra. But first, the majestic Carboyd Ranges and the jewel that lies between them, Lake Argyle. Lake Argyle, the heart of the Ord River scheme, a tranquil, richly deep blue mirror-like gem that took only one wet season to fill completely. And holding this massive ocean of the interior in place is a man-made earthen dam that's barely 150 metres wide. Another must for any visitor travelling in the far north of this state that appears to be always full of surprises. long way downstream in the Ord River, the diversion dam for the Ord scheme, located just a few minutes' drive to the west of Kununurra. The kilometre-wide concrete dam provides a safe harbour for a wildlife sanctuary that features numerous varieties of birdlife, plus the occasional reptile. Day 12 with 3,419 kilometres clocked up so far in our roundabout back and beyond trek as we go back up to the Victoria Highway to cross the diversion dam wall and proceed to the township of Kununurra. And once again, the early morning temperature is soaring way past the 40s, presenting us yet again with the worst sort of travelling weather you could ever imagine. If it wasn't for the ever-changing scenery in this part of the nation, you'd be tempted to chuck it all in and catch a plane back home. Next destination to the land renowned for the ditty, a part of the story that's the Northern Territory, and you won't know how it ends till you've been. And we're well on our way to finding out, aiming for Katherine via Timber Creek, the Victoria River and Gregory National Park. Once again, dead straight roads, but this time they're tar, and the horizon scenery here, approaching the Pinkerton Ranges, manages to change shape and size dramatically, always presenting the visitor with something different. However, there are still stretches of absolutely nothing except a long, straight and narrow road. Halfway between Kununurra and Katherine is the massive Victoria River, and it keeps the driver company for quite a while as you continue along the highway named after it, approaching the next fuel stop, Timber Creek. The next different landscape on the tour guide directory is the remarkable and extremely green Gregory National Park, featuring Mesa Mountains and enormous scree slopes. And further on down the road, the Victoria River crossing. And finally, to make this day perfect, a rainbow. The odometer reads 3,915 kilometres, and the map says it's Katherine, and our eyes say light poles, civilization. And for the first time on the trip so far, the camera has been quick enough to capture the enormity of a road train. Then we reach the centre of the town and turn onto the Stewart Highway and our new destination, Katherine Gorge. The gorge is only 32 kilometres off the main road and well and truly worth the detour, especially if you take advantage of the boat trips up the gorges with one of the tour guides, like ours, Tony Braithwaite. What he didn't know about this national park wasn't worth knowing. Okay, Tony? Okay,
at the moment we're travelling upstream on the Katherine River. The river has its headwaters southwest Arnhem Land. That's a place called Snowdrop. From there she flows back around about 320 kilometres to where she joins up with the Daly River. From there she flows out into the Timor Sea at a place called Anson Bay, and that's around about 120 kilometres southwest of Darwin. The river was first named by a white man in 1862, and that was by the now famous Scottish explorer John McDowell Stewart. He named the river after the second daughter of an Adelaide pastoralist, James Chambers, who was a patron of around about 3 of Stewart's expeditions to the north. And then it was known the north of South Australia. The rock formation you see through the tour is Cambogia, or metamorphic sandstone, and that dates between 1400 and 1800 million years of age. It was caused through an upheaval, formed the fissure line or fault line, and the water just worked its way through and formed the gorges. There's 13 gorges altogether in the system, and they run for around about 14 kilometres. Each gorge is separated by a set of rapids, and the average depth between 6 and 8 metres, and it does vary quite a bit, especially through the wet season. We could be another 40 feet up in the air. I'll tell you a little bit about that when we get further up. Vegetation we've got here ranges from the silverleaf paperbarks, or Melaleuca argentea, and also the pandanus. The Aboriginals use them in this area, and you'll find these lining most of the waterways through up here, and they strip the bark of the Melaleucas, line the top of their humpies, or the pandanus, the females or the Aboriginal ladies, that strip the leaves off, semi-dry them, take out the centre fibres, and weave most of their domestic gears such as mats, lap-laps and dilly bags. Pandanus and the Melaleucas serve a most important role to nature, as with their root systems and heavy trunks. They help hold the banks together, and that slows down the erosion effect we get throughout the wet season. Some of the narrower spots up here, the water can get up to speeds of about 100 kilometres an hour, so it's most important. Most of the Melaleucas and pandanus and freshwater mangroves are submerged for anything up to 3 months. Once the water level drops and the branches are exposed, they shoot away again.
Just in front of us is what we call the Swallow's Cave. It's named after a little bird called the fairy martin, or bottle swallow, a migratory bird. We return to this area around about June, July. Once they get back here, they start to build mud nests up on the ceiling of the cave. Once they build the mud nests, they lay their eggs, and usually have the young fellas out flying before the floodwaters hit.
Continuing our water trek back down the river, we reach the junction of number 1 and 2 gorges. And at 120 foot or 20 fathoms, it's the deepest part of the entire geological wonder that is Catherine Gorge.
Okay, these paintings here are estimated to be around about 200 years of age. The oldest set of paintings we've got in the gorge system are at the 10th gorge. That's at a place called the Darwin Valley. They're painted on a mushroom-shaped rock. They're estimated to be between 5,000 and 7,000 years. The materials they use to get their colour is a red ochre, which is a low-grade iron ore, a hematite. They just crush that up into a fine powder and mix it with an animal fat. That's to give it penetration into the rock.
And after an eye-opening morning at Catherine, it's back on the road again, heading this time for the thermal pools of Mataranka. And once again, a tarred Stuart Highway that runs dead straight to the horizon.
The odometer has just crept past the 4,000 kilometre mark as we enter the Mataranka Park. Not too sure about the build-up to the pools that have never been promoted or even diarised. So few people know the real history of the area, and those who do conflict with each other. So we're just going to have to find out for ourselves. The walk into the pool is lined prolifically with fan palms, paper barks and melaleucas. We're told the catchment area is made up of limestone and stretches way back to Catherine, with the Roper and the Little Rivers the main source. But once again, the research doesn't do justice to the reality. This first pool is crystal clear, quite a remarkable sight, only surpassed by the larger pool further down the track. It's like a TV commercial for a tropical island resort. The only difference being the water is clearer and we're a heck of a long way from the nearest ocean. Back to the wagons now for the next stage of a roundabout back and beyond as we journey south to the Daly Waters. For as the sign says, true bush hospitality. So far we've travelled 4,252 kilometres and the only real signs of wildlife were spotted from the helicopter. But as usual, it takes a real bush pup to break even the biggest drought. For the first time in 13 days, the camera finally captures outback fauna on the hoof, up close, to discover the kangaroo is nearly as human as us. Then back to the road for an all-night push to Alice, following the old telegraph line dead south down the Stuart Highway. An 866-kilometre run on a road as straight as a die, with only the 50-metre long road trains to contend with. And at Alice, we're greeted appropriately by one of the Central Australian specialties, a bright early morning sunrise. Our destination at last, the outskirts of Alice Springs. After a torturous 14 days, driving nearly non-stop for 5,118 kilometres in heat and humidity, you only believe if you've actually lived through it. Seeing landscapes covering all aspects of the geological handbook for outback travellers, even including road trains. Well, you have to admit they're big enough to be classified. The thriving metropolis of Alice Springs, very early in the morning of our day 14, after a non-stop, all-night drive. Never ever did we think we'd be so delighted to finish a four-wheel drive trek a roundabout back and beyond. From the Rock to Alice the long way, and what a way to go. It's enough to make you want to go back, and we will.